Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for hanging out with us again this week on Todd-versations. I am so thrilled with my guest today. I am so thrilled with this conversation. The entire month we're talking about increasing consumption, food waste, how they intertwine together, why they should intertwine together in conversation. And I cannot think of a better company or a better person to have join me today. Please, everybody, give it up for the president and CEO of Produce for Better Health Foundation, Wendy Reinhardt Kapsak. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's an honor. I'm so thrilled to have you here. As I just said, I am so fired up about trying to talk about consumption and why it's important. And it's a challenging subject. And, why food waste is now, food waste is a big topic, and how, increasing consumption helps the food waste problem and all these other things. And so again, just to have you here to share about what you guys are doing at Pbh is super exciting for me, because you guys are the benchmark out there. You guys are kicking in doors and creating a buzz and talking about things that need to be talked about on a daily basis with a whole lot of people supporting you. And so I'm thrilled to have you. So a huge welcome, and thanks for hanging out with me.
Thank you. I'm excited for our conversation. I love talking to passionate people.
Thank you. This is a big subject for me, and I really love it. And so, again, I'm excited that we get to go down this path. Before we get going, though, just tell everybody a little bit about who you are. I mean, I could read your bio, but that seems so cheesy. It better come from your heart and let people hear from you a little bit.
Okay. Well, my name is Wendy Reinhardt Kapsak.
I got that part. I got that right.
Good. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm a mom of 3, and I lead a very important organization called the Produce for Better Health Foundation. And we are focused 100% every single day on improving Americans' health and happiness through fruits and vegetables.
I love it. And hence this conversation, why it's going to be so darn good. So let's talk about Pbh a little bit, give everybody a little frame up that don't know. And of course, Produce for Better Health, everybody clue in Pbh. That's what we're going with, not Pbj, but Pbh. So tell me a little bit about, what is Pbh? And I think as well, when you answer that question, tell people why Pbh matters.
Sure. So Pbh is a nonprofit organization. We're a 501c3 organization, which means we're more of an educational foundation. We don't lobby or that type of thing. Mm-hmm. So we are focused, like I said, 100% on improving America's health and happiness through fruits and vegetables. We do consumer research. We interface directly with consumers and those who influence their decisions. And we also convene the critical stakeholders necessary to actually make improved consumption a reality. So I strongly believe that no one organization is responsible or can affect on its own produce consumption. It's one of the most complex issues facing the produce industry and others. So we will need multiple people all rowing in the same direction, if you will, to make progress. But that means, though, that there needs to be a leader, and there's lots of different kinds of leaders. So I believe Pbh is uniquely positioned as a 501c3 nonprofit organization to convene those critical stakeholders to make improved consumption a reality. And that's why Pbh matters. And it matters because consumers, as you know, don't really eat fruits and vegetables. In fact, our most recent research lets us know that people are eating vegetables maybe once a day during the week, and fruit even less. So we have some great progress to make.
Yeah, well, there is. And I always, increasing consumption, sometimes you call it low-hanging fruit. There's work to be done. There's hard work, and there's immediate work that can be done too. And I know you guys are doing that. We're going to get into all that too, because as I normally do, I have about 314,000 questions for you. You're supported by the industry, and doing my research and kind of diving in deep into the weeds a little bit about you guys. You've got over 400 companies, big and small, it looks like, that growers, packers, processors, trade association, retailers, on and on, that support what you guys are doing. What's that say about your mission when you have that kind of draw? You got those, that many people that, from all avenues looking at what you're doing. I mean, it's obviously super positive, but what's it say about where you're heading?
Well, I think it means that produce consumption or fruit and vegetable consumption inside and also outside of the produce industry can be a unifying issue.
Love that.
We all want improved consumption. We're all going about it in our own way, let's say day to day. but it could be for an industry, and I've worked in a lot of different ones, that is somewhat disparate in a way. It's the most disparate or like industry I've ever worked in. It's an opportunity to take all of that collective power and unify the industry on this issue, which impacts business, of course, but it also impacts the public. And I think there's an excellent opportunity to use the collective industry power and voice to positively impact the public good, and that is through produce consumption.
I love it. You've got a tagline that I found kind of cool. It says, Produce for Better Health is committed to changing consumer behavior to increase their consumption of fruit and vegetables. Can you explain what that means a little bit and how that resonates with you?
Yeah. So I think if I say that we're going to positively impact consumption, is I think people oftentimes when they think about, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Particularly in the industry, they might say, well, I want to increase strawberries. I want to increase the actual product itself. But if I take a step back and look at behavioral science and I look at the consumer journey, and I see that there are multiple points at which we could positively impact the consumption of any product. And a case in point might be, I could pick one, but is at what point does great tasting fresh produce impact consumption? Yeah. At what point does consumption get impacted, not just at the retail level or at the food service level, at the point of purchase, but at the point of true consumption? And there's a lot that happens from that point of selection or purchase to actually getting it in people's mouth. I actually think and I just wrote a piece for the industry around the idea of both the short and the long game on consumption. Both of them are important. The industry tends to focus on sales, which is critical. It's kind of like making those major plays on the field, moving the chains, getting it done. There's a whole nother game to play to get actually to the Super Bowl or to the big prize. And that is when we actually get the product in people's mouth and they experience the immediate as well as the long-term value. And that also means something that you brought up, earlier in our discussion, is it also means that they're not wasting the products either. Yeah. And so it's truly kind of mission delivered or mission accomplished when we get it in the mouths of people. And you have to play both the short and the long game if we're going to win.
Yeah, 100%. I was reading an article, and I'm glad you went down this trail. I was reading an article in the European Journal, Clinical Nutrition. I had some thoughts I wanted to kind of understand.
Wow, you are like super
I'm super nerdy when I get into I'm super nerdy when I get into this stuff because I want to learn, right? That's what's so fun about this. I get to learn too, right? And then I get to ask questions about what I don't.
I can't wait for you to tell me what you're talking about. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, so they did a study with kids. They had 749 kids, and they worked with them talking about with fruits and vegetables. And they started inserting conversations about fruit and vegetables into the curriculum at school. They started serving more fruits and vegetables at school, and they made a really conscious effort to help educate people about choices and at this young age. It was really interesting because the kids were 5 to 11 years old, and compared to the controlled school that didn't go through this process, the lunchtime consumption was substantially higher, right, at school, because kids were now like, I want to go eat that. Oh, I love a strawberry. I never, whatever it might be. But what's really fascinating is that their consumption grew at home as well by being able to kind of, come back out and start these conversations. So to your point of what you're saying, getting information out in front of people, especially to consumers, to help them make choices is a really powerful tool. And I just love the fact that that's really something that you guys are so you strongly anchored in, and giving back to people. Because I think it's just, the data doesn't lie. And it says, we've got to keep these conversations talking. So yeah. I find it to be I think it's really cool.
Thanks for joining the Todd-versation. And now a word from our sponsor.
Hi. This is Dr. Gary Beal, CEO and co-inventor of NatureWrap, a revolutionary coating designed to extend shelf life and cut food waste. Thank you for listening to Todd-versations and Todd Bits. Food waste is a worldwide pressing topic. Here are some of the facts that you need to know. Food waste takes up more room in landfills than anything else. In the United States, we discard more food than any other country, about 80 billion pounds per year. Food waste contributes to 11% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. At Navico, we're revolutionizing the produce industry with our OMRI-approved NatureWrap edible coating. Our goal is to reduce food loss, improve profitability, and elevate sustainability. We're in the business of bringing fresher produce to tables around the world. Check us out at navicoinc.com.
When you think about behavioral science, so there's a couple things to bridge from the last question to the comment you just made, is there is a continuum on behavior. And so it is, if we look at a large meta-analysis, is where we look at lots of different studies and we look at the power of interventions and their impact. Okay. So there is knowledge, or what we like to call know, KNOW, feel, which is the emotions. And there's a lot to unpack in that part of your change mindset. And then the actual doing. And so what you just described, I didn't read the study, but what you described is what I would call more of a 360-degree intervention that gets to likely definitely the knowledge part of things, probably that interaction associated with those conversations also is emotive and or is engaging in a way that people inspires them to want to actually do something or take an action. And then we serve the product, we make it like really easy for people. And that's a key element of behavioral science. We got to make it easy. So now it's in front of us. Okay. And so they're all working together to have a positive impact on consumption, let's say within the school and also with outside of the school and at home. And so all of those things work together. And that's why it will take, Todd, a multi-sector approach to positively impacting consumption. You heard me say earlier in our conversation that no one group is going to affect collective consumption on their own. It'll be a lot of people that will recognize it's not just consumption, but it's about changing and or building new consumption behaviors, new reasons, new occasions that will win the day in the end. And we all have to be rowing in the same direction. We got to work together.
Oh, I 100% agree. And, I think it's so important that companies that are in this space take a hard look at the spend and say, this is a spend of money we need to get on the forefront of our budgeting, and a spend of money that we need to get on the forefront of our thought process. Because when I take a look at the data at children, and I've got, we'll get into downstream, I've got some other thoughts too, because I think, we've got to invest in the next customer, right? You have, in my humble opinion, I think you have a better chance to drive children into positivity and food changes than you do adults, right? Because they've already got their bad habits and stuff. You can get them to do it, but we start with these kids. We're building a next generation of thinkers that are walking in the grocery store that are more apt to say, that's where I want to go because that's what I ate when I was a kid. And I think that's so important that we lean into that. So I hope the industry is listening. I hope they listen and say, hey, we've got to get to the table and recognize that this is a valuable part of the overall part of what the produce industry holds to the world. I really do.
One of the things that you raise, I think, is really important. If I think back to some other data that even we have, is we have a report called the State of the Plate. We look at produce frequency. And so what we're doing is we're looking at frequency as a proxy for habit. So you kind of mentioned, I ate this when I was a kid. Whenever I have these foods, I also eat this. You hope we want to look for those mix and match opportunities also for produce, in addition to eating it on its own. So what we found is that, and for example, in all age groups, we see that vegetable habits or frequency of consumption for vegetables in all age groups is declining.
Yeah.
And it's eroding over time. And so what we see here is the cohorts that we could typically depend on to keep consumption at least flat, they are decreasing in their behaviors. So who are those cohorts? Those cohorts are very, let's say, folks that are more seasoned, that have lived a little, and now they're moving into the older years or their golden years where they're hoping to maintain their health. And then also really young kids. Okay. When parents are like super energetic, yes, I'm going to feed my kids super healthy. So what we see is those two cohorts they are declining in vegetable consumption as well as at times fruit consumption. So the generations or the age groups where we used to depend on them to at least hold, we're seeing some declines. And that lets us know too, that kind of that age old advice, eat your vegetables or whatever, or the practice of certain types of meal patterns isn't now being passed on from generation to generation. So in some respects, we're kind of starting from scratch. And at Pbh, we've chosen millennials and Gen Zs for a lot of reasons, but they are also the young parents of the next generation. And they are in a powerful position when they have young children to make some significant changes to diet or increase fruits and vegetables, which aligns with a lot of other values they have. And so we think that's a critical group that can certainly affect young children. And then if we look at kind of what's happening in those early years, there's a significant opportunity. If you look at actually dietary intake data, it's at that 2-year mark when kids start to eat table food that their diet quality overall really is impacted in a less than positive way.
I love that. The crab's killer.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it. Talk to me a little bit about how you guys connect, the industry and the public health organizations, because I think this is a really important aspect of what what Pbh does. So can you explain how this works? And I'm going to ask this question a lot. Why does it matter? Right. And I think
I think there's a couple of things I'm going to pull from lots of my experience here, but
you go.
In my opinions, so the public health community is very important. I would say overall, let's talk about some specifics within the public health community. First of all, they care deeply about people. They're a service-oriented industry, not a sales-oriented industry. Right. So that service orientation and their belief in the power of a healthy diet to impact positively the future is a value that can certainly benefit the broader fruit and vegetable industry. So dietitian, for example, that has touched public health is dietitians or those working in, let's say, feeding programs within the context of public health. So now I'll mention things like SNAP or WIC. These are people that care about and to serve people. And they also are what I would call natural fruit and vegetable promoters. And so they're almost like this army of people that actually, without trying, they are on a mission to serve others in many instances by improving their access to healthy food. And that certainly includes fruits and vegetables. So they are like this untapped group of folks that the industry doesn't interface with every single day. But this is a very passionate group of people that could be certainly, I don't want to use it, but leverage further to positively impact fruit and vegetable consumption. The important thing to note, though, is these two groups, because they don't talk often, is they don't understand each other. And so they don't necessarily speak the same language. And so I believe that's a barrier actually to improving fruit and vegetable consumption. And it's why Pbh is important to serve as that convener or connector between the two groups in a way that helps them understand each other and understand each other's needs, but also their pressure points, and see how we could work, given that we have the same mission, advance that mission together. I'm going to give you some examples. In recently talking to the American Society for Public Health Nutritionists, these are people who work, for example, I mentioned SNAP and WIC. And so these are feeding programs that are funded by USDA, or I should say administered by USDA, yet funded by Congress. And so one of the biggest needs that group has, because I mentioned they're a service industry, they don't have a lot of additional resources. But what they do need, and what they've asked from us, is to please impart to the other industry trade associations and or industry directly themselves that they absolutely need them to be advocating and in some cases lobbying for more funding to be appropriated to these feeding programs from Congress so that they can do the things that everybody wants them to do, which is promote fruits and vegetables. So this is another example around how the policy sector can have a significant impact, but they can't have an impact on their own. They have to be able to work together. So public health working with industry to positively impact policy, i.e. feeding programs that are administered by USDA yet funded through Congress, is very, very important. And the industry may not view like particularly the grower set may view things like the Farm Bill as having more appropriated to nutrition and less focused on specialty agriculture. But actually, if we leverage them together, they actually are almost all about fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right.
So there's, an organization like PBH, if it didn't exist, there would be a lot less of an opportunity for these two groups to interface. And so they could work together to positively impact consumption. It's important for the industry to know, though, that public health overall is skeptical of industry, and may have different ideas about how agriculture should work. And so it's okay, by the way, to have tension in these conversations, because that tension can actually lead to greater understanding and ultimately greater collaboration. And so I strongly believe that, having worked in large scale corn and soybean agriculture, in addition to global fruit and vegetable agriculture prior to coming to this role. So that's my passionate view.
I love it. No, look, you're 100% right. And when you talk about what's going on, up on the Hill, you talk about what's going on with the USDA and funding and all this stuff. It's incredibly important that we pay attention to what's going on and why it's going on, because think about all the lunches that are served every single day, and take a real hard look at what's being served in those lunches. We need to make conscious changes. We need to start working and increasing consumption of fruits and vegetables on kids' plates. And I'm not talking about, stuff that's packed in sugar. I'm not talking about, things that aren't necessarily the best things for them, but really trying to get into that deep dive of like, let's make a conscientious effort to get fresh fruits and vegetables on plates every day, because it's going to create so much positivity, not only from a learning perspective, because the data supports it, but from a health perspective as they age. There's a lot of things that we can be doing that, again, I always say low-hanging fruit. It's such a cliche, but it really is in a lot of ways. So I appreciate the perspective you've taken with that, and the position, especially, I think, kind of a challenge to everybody to kind of pay attention to some ways of what's going on, and how we can work together to try to increase consumption through the process, through Washington, D.C.
Consumption is like, and everyone's heard this analogy or story around the elephant. Do you know what I'm saying? So consumption is this big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So if you're touching the tail and I'm touching the trunk, and we're all experiencing a different part of it, or we're all focused on another part of it. But when we take a step back, we really see, wow, this is a big issue. And I will tell you, in my life, I've seen the most change not when we expect others to change, meaning in this case, consumers to eat more fruits and vegetables, but we are more self-reflective. And we say, if we want this to change, we have to change. And I believe that the industry may, if they are serious about improving consumption, which I believe they are, and earnest about it, it does mean that we will, as is public health, we need to be more self-reflective, because despite all the amazing public health efforts, despite all the amazing industry efforts around consumption, including that of PBH, we need to take some different approaches if we're going to make a change. And the data says that. And so if you want that data to change, we might just need to be a little bit more self-reflective. And so that's where you see, in coming onto PBH about 5 years ago, I felt it was so important, along with those members on our board, right, to say we need to invest in behavioral science that helps us understand today's consumers in a way that gets beyond, let's say, the commodity we're trying to improve consumption of, but get at the heart of the issue and how we actually change consumer behavior.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, I say it all the time when I started in this business. You know, my first priority was to get somebody to eat an apple. Then the second one was to convince you to eat the organic one, right? Because I knew if I can get you to eat the apple, I was halfway home, right? That's really, it's like, get it into the routine. I can work the other narrative behind it. Tell me a little bit, you know, and I love this track that we're on. I think it sets us up for this next question is, what's the National Fruit and Vegetable Consumption Coalition? You know, can you say who's in the coalition and tell everybody a little bit about what it is?
Absolutely. So in the spirit of providing a platform for people to, particularly lots of sectors, to convene on this issue, including public health as well as industry, but some others too, is I established, along with those founding coalition members, the National Fruit and Vegetable Consumption Coalition. I should give credit to others. Obviously, there was a group when I came on board 5 years ago. It's called the National Fruit and Vegetable Alliance, and so it was essentially a public-private partnership with with government agencies, along with other public health organizations, with Pbh serving as a chair. And so the goal at the time was to pick a few initiatives that the group could get around in the spirit of consumption. And so I felt that it's important, I guess, for the listeners and viewers essentially to recognize that just as the industry and consumers have evolved, so too has public health. So, and so too must an organization like Pbh. So 30 plus years ago, when Pbh was founded, the approach to public health was very education focused, and education campaign focused. So there was something called 5 a day, as an example. Another was More Matters. So this still is super important. Remember, I talked about a behavior change construct called know, feel, and do. And so there's now something within the public health community that is called policy, systems, and environmental change. And so the public health community talks, yes, about education, but talks in this context of a multi-sector approach. So policy, our systems, how everything works together for the greater good idea, and environment. How does is the environment conducive to positive change? We could be talking about physical activity, recycling, we could be talking about, but this same construct is applied within the public health community to determine impact. So I felt that it was important, if the public health community agreed that that's the approach that should be taken, that the entity that tries to drive against that also take that approach. And so to affect positive behavior change from a policy, systems, environmental context, you would need to convene all the critical sectors to make that a reality. So the National Fruit, with those founding members' support, the National Fruit and Vegetable Alliance, over the last year or so, has determined that, yes, they would like to take a policy, systems, and environmental approach to consumption, that they believe that people can believe something, but then, like, do they do anything about it? So people are still saying they believe that, but we're not talking together still. So the idea is actually to turn the alliance into the National Fruit and Vegetable Consumption Coalition in a way that elevates fruit and vegetable consumption as a national priority. And that means, one, expanding the coalition beyond public health and the government. Two, is creating a platform that is almost serving like an incubator approach to fruit and vegetable consumption efforts, and really identifying best practices, and then essentially developing a national action plan for which to measure progress among various, either determine priorities and or measure progress against those priorities for each sector.
I love it. I mean, it goes back to what I said in the beginning. You cannot have a conversation about consumption with produce without Pbh at the table.
Well,
You just
thank
can't.
you.
No, it's really true, because I think that you guys have, look, you've been around a long time. Today's not your first rodeo, right? You have tried, and I'm sure things have, you've stubbed a toe, and this organization has continued to grow as the world has changed. And I think that your relevance is fantastic, and the things that you talk about. And one of the things I was interested in, I'd like to touch on next, would be the Lead to Change movement. I think it kind of flips in. Can you talk a little bit about what that is for you guys?
Yeah. So Lead the Change was established in June of 2020. And this was at the urging of our officers to really, to take essentially the vision that I had for an organization like Pbh, but really for the broader industry, and try to encourage industry to participate in consumption and or really support consumption from a place that was not about specific products or commodities, but from the collective. And so Lead the Change is essentially a unifying campaign for the industry to elevate fruit and vegetable consumption as a national priority. It includes three key things that tie together, or three key strategic priorities underneath that. So one is research. And so we have done a lot and are doing a lot of research, not like sales data, but frequency, habit data, trying to understand from a consumer behavioral perspective, what are the key areas for which we would have the best opportunity to impact consumer behavior. And then let's create, initiatives that are informed by that research. So it includes research. It includes the National Fruit and Vegetable Consumption Coalition. And it also includes, hopefully, we're hopeful to launch the first ever National Fruit and Vegetable Consumption Summit in 2023, where we would convene all those sectors and essentially determine that national action plan together. It is so, thanks for being positive about it, because it is what, and this is how you behave as a adult industry. And so instead of fighting over, and there's a place, by the way, to fight on the policy floor, in the sales room with those.
Yeah.
Okay. So this requires a different mindset. It requires a collective mindset. It requires a public good mindset, and it requires one that's looking at the long game.
Yeah.
And so when toddlers fight between each other, teenagers get emotional about what they want to achieve. Adults have experience, and they see what has worked and what has not, and do their best to lead, to make choices that will affect not only themselves, but future generations.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I love that. And you're absolutely right. It's consumption to the industry needs to be looked at as a commonality, and who you are and what PO you're trying to get and what retailer and what next big thing you think you need. That's
important. I want to be clear. I'm not saying it's not. It is.
No, it is. But when it comes to trying to look at consumption, it becomes, we're all standing together. There is no PO. There is no this company, that company. It's how do we all collectively work together that we all will end up thriving at the end. Like I said earlier, it's like, my job was to get you to eat an apple, but convince you to eat the organic one in my career, right? It's kind of the same mindset. And I love the fact that you're coming from this everybody perspective, and you can feel the energy that you're giving off about trying to get everybody to sit down and find this commonality to move the ball down the field, because ultimately everybody wins.
I think if you can, it's like, if we can look a little bit bigger, we would see that the competition is each other in certain instances, and in other ways it's not. Yeah. And so it's actually everything else that's stealing stomach share from the capital F, capital V fruits and vegetables, or the capital S stomach share. And so, I think what we're trying to do is grow the stomach share for fruits and vegetables.
I love that.
And recognize that the challenge, or I don't want to call it the enemy, but like the opposition here, or the attention for consumers' share of stomach is not strawberries from one area versus another area.
Right. One of the things I find so fascinating about what PBH does is, and I kind of going to be a big frame up to probably a simple question, but fruit and vegetables are really an area in the grocery store that people can actually make, honestly, a choice. Like they can pick up a peach and smell it and decide if they want it. They can look at the berries. They can flip them upside down. You can pop open the clamshell. You can take, you know what, you can reach in and try a grape to see what it tastes like if you want. I mean,
Which
you
I
can't
do.
really, yeah, for sure. But you're not going to pop a top on salsa and go, oh, that smells, whatever. Or you're not going to go ask the meat guy, hey, can I smell a T-bone, right? That's kind of weird. I don't think people do that. But fruits and vegetables become very, very personal. And sometimes, the personality and consumption, maybe they don't necessarily jive. And, sometimes it's different how they consume them. But one of the things that I'm so impressed by when looking at what PBH is about is your website. And, the amount of recipes that you have, I mean, they're literally off the hook. You could eat for months and months and months off your website, just, every day, something new, something different. You've really made it very easy for people to lean into what we've just been talking about, as far as any kind of eater can find something or suggestion that fits their food lifestyle.
Sure.
But, you've created this information, and, when I looked on the site, when I think about that opportunity to pick up that peach or to pick up something you've never tried, maybe some kind of a melon or a squash, or whatever it is, you've got information about produce science from A to Z. I don't know how much is on there. I didn't count it. I'm not going to lie. I didn't go, start with apple and finish with zucchini. There's a ton of it on there. But I mean, you guys have got buying tips. You've got nutritional content. You guys go as far, you go as far as providing social media stuff for people. Like, here, post this. All in the guise of uplifting and to drive increased consumption, all of it. It's available to everybody, which is what's just fascinating. I mean, there's no special code. It's just like anybody that wants to get in from a retail perspective, a produce manager, that's listening to us, right? Tell me about it a little. I've kind of expanded about the whole thing, but just give me your perspective a little bit about how important that is, what you've created in that sense to your mission.
It's really interesting. In another role that I had, I was talking to some produce managers, and I asked them, I said, so where do you go? This before PBH, where do you go for produce information? And produce managers said, I Google it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, okay. So any recipe, I mean, some people are investing in their own things or have departments that help them with that, corporate comm, whatever. But the produce manager may not have even thinking about internal resources. They're straight up going to Google it. So what you're talking about is a part of our website. It's produce info, really, I guess you would say. And my approach, it's really grounded or rooted in behavioral science. So remember I told you about know, K-N-O-W, feel, right, and do. So K-N-O-W is important. It's foundational. And it can inspire feeling. People think, oh, really? Knowledge can? Well, it can inspire confidence. And so in this case, how do I select? What I like to say is, how do I select, store, serve, savor, and maybe even share information about produce? It could inspire confidence in me. And so the select, if I think I'll mention something else I said earlier, is there's a journey, okay, for consumers to go through when they do any of this. And so it's like an equation. There's rate limiting steps in equations, because you said you were a nerd. And so I'm kind of a nerd too. And so the rate limiting steps might be, for somebody, I have no idea how to select this. And the selection process can significantly downstream impact my flavor experience. All of this can, my selection, my storage, and my serving can impact my flavor, my taste experience, which is an emotive one, a feeling one. And so if I have a rate limiting step at the very fact of selection, I have no emotional connection to the product. I'm not
Yeah.
confident in myself. Therefore, I'm not confident in the product. So why am I going to spend my hard-earned money, particularly in today's environment, to even make the choice? And so so what you see sometimes, which is awesome, there's obviously a movement within retail to have a really clean store, clean department, not a lot of signage, etc. But but sometimes you see that at the point of selection or purchase is something that can hopefully help consumers. Pbh's information, essentially produce information from A to Z, tries to, and then we'll feature it at different points in time, seasonality wise, even, to help people inspire their confidence in their abilities when they are in a moment to actually make a selection, to know what to do. And that take place through the website, i.e. using the website information on social media, but it's also something that influencers, essentially people who inspire, either in the digital and online space, before people get to retail or at retail themselves, or even in the food service environment, people want this information and they don't want to go to 50 places for it. So, or they don't want to Google it. And so there's certainly more we could do, right, to help that produce manager know that they don't have to Google it. They can at least get a good running start on our website. And so again, knowledge is critically important to behavior change. There are rate limiting steps in that consumer journey. We don't want knowledge to be one of those rate limiting steps that doesn't allow people to feel confident enough to even make a selection.
Yeah, no, look, it's a phenomenal website, and I encourage everybody to jump on it and spend. I tell you, jump on it and spend 5 minutes, and then after 15, you can go. God, I've been here for 15 minutes, because that's it's literally what I did. I got on. It's like all of a sudden I started clicking, whatever letter I came up with, and I started going, wow, this is so fantastic. I never knew, and to really see it, and I think about the produce manager, somebody that wants to be able to talk to people, somebody who wants to do something more inside their stores and uplift their consumers. This is a great place to go. This is a great tool.
Yeah, there is a ton of information on there. And I think if we thought about at every point in that consumer journey, how do we make it easy for consumers? And selection is just one part. Storing it is another part, knowing what to do with it and feeling confident in that. And then actually helping people to have more occasions for which to know they could add fruits and vegetables, they could incorporate them, etc. That's something that we're very, very focused on, particularly in this new research that we haven't released yet.
Oh, cool. Wow. Well, that's I'm going to ask you that question, actually. Yes, I will. I do want to talk about something that really got me thinking. And I'm going to about something that I read, something that you guys are doing, and it is the evidence of a growing consumption crisis. And I think it's an interesting way of framing it up. And so, of course, I, in my nerdnik ways, went off and did a little bit of a dive, and I found a study from the City University in London that talked about the economic, when the economies go downturn, what does it actually do to health? I was curious. It's like, well, was there a rise in health, a decrease in health? It's really fascinating that back in 2008, they pulled this up that resulted in changes in individual health behavior with significant increase with the likelihood of obesity, diabetes, and mental health problems associated with a bad economy.
I need you to send me that pronto. Go ahead.
Right here. I got it. So, yeah, one of my nerd magazines, Science Daily. But, it was really fascinating to me. So I started digging a little bit deeper into that conversation. And what was really interesting about it is that while the economy went down, there was actually a slight decrease in alcohol and cigarettes, because they probably can't, it was probably an issue of affording, but also fruit, which I thought was a really interesting correlation. Not that it's, one without the other, but it was really surprising to me to take a look at this data and to recognize that there's a lot that goes on. We start to make sacrifices, which we all are having to live in a world that seems to be doing that. So I want to talk a little bit about the growing consumption crisis, if you wouldn't mind framing it up a little bit from your perspective. And then I want to talk a little bit about kind of the last 2 years as well. I want to kind of twist that into what's going on, if you don't mind.
I'll talk about it too. So, and maybe I'll tell you. So prior to the pandemic, This, or when I came on to PBH 5 years ago, is I wanted to make sure that the board, et cetera, the stakeholders, they wanted to see a change. And so they did. And then we worked together to transform what I would call the external facing assets of the organization. You mentioned the website, which by the way is fruitsandveggies.org. Fruits and veggies.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't, I'm not going to lie to you. Normally I have that up here and I realized I didn't do it. I wasn't going to try to guess. Thank you. Big save. No, high five to you. High five to you for that. Thank you.
And so, but then came the work that we have talked about, which is this more collective kind of, not so much about a commodity, but really about the collective. Mm-hmm. And so I want to say the concept of a crisis needs to be, I just need to preface that. Okay. So there are many crises that we are affecting the US, obviously also around the world. And so I don't want to be flippant with that word. No. But what I want to do is marry it with two other words and talk about a chronic consumption crisis in the United States and actually around the world. But here in the United States, a chronic consumption crisis that is affecting our culture, our society, and our economy. And I think it should be sobering. And this is that part going back to that self-reflection here is, wait a minute, this isn't just something that we're experiencing as the result of the last 2 years, Todd. This has been going on for a very long time. Yeah. And so I say that in some respects, consumption is an elusive issue for the produce industry and public health and public health. Yeah. And so it's like the one thing is like, can we get after this? Come on. And I think that the word crisis is something that I don't use lightly. And that concept that we use, but the concept of a chronic or ongoing persistent issue is very important. And the future, if I now bring it back to the industry, the future of the industry really depends on addressing it.
100%. Yeah, no, look, I am with you all the way with what you said. Crisis is a big word. Crisis is a word that probably kids, in fifth grade are learning how to spell now, right? I mean, it's something that's a little bit more involved in our language, unfortunately. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a challenge that we've got to face head on. And I think, kind of leaning into what's gone on the last 2 years, in some ways it's unfortunate, the pandemic is what it is, but it took a pandemic to kind of change the mindset a little bit of people and to look differently at their food. We know fruits and vegetables, the data seems to support fruits and vegetables, have benefited from that paradigm shift. There's no doubt about it. Question, do you think it's going to change and will it keep itself sustained as we kind of come out of all this? When you think about, kind of what we're tying in together.
Yeah. So I would say, I said this statement that we are in the US, we're experiencing a chronic or persistent consumption crisis that is affecting our culture, our society, and our economy. And that was only further illuminated, not just with the incidence of a pandemic, but the pandemic's effect on our health, our society, and our economy. Yeah. And so you are right in that I agree with you in that sales data indicates that consumption of fruits and vegetables likely increase, but I'm not convinced that those numbers are true. Yeah. Because we don't really know if people consume the products, because consumption of canned, for example, and frozen also increase. We don't know. Somebody could have a bunker somewhere full of canned produce or canned
I'm sure
vegetables.
They're out there.
They are out there. Or a freezer full, right?
Right.
We also know that by value, meat is wasted at a high level. By volume, fruits and vegetables are among the most wasted food products that are wasted. So, and that's fresh, and it's a big deterrent for some who maybe don't have access to storage, et cetera. So We also know people increased their consumption of Oreos and potato chips, and we know
Absolutely.
that the
Alcohol, cigarettes, all of it.
the incidence of obesity has also crept up in this time period. So I love the research that you point to, because it's important to look back at like a previous, we've never experienced what we're experiencing now, but to understand or look back historically at the incidence of an economic downturn, and understanding the effects of that on public health, and recognizing that increased fresh produce consumption or increased fruit and vegetable consumption overall has the power to be able to improve health and also improve overall mental health to some degree. And that's more emerging research. That's the next one we should research is indicating that. And we actually in April, we're going to have a webinar that's really talking about food and mood. So not only would we say fruits and vegetables are food rooted in better health, and that would include immunity, but fruits and vegetables are also food rooted in a better mood. And so a lot of the scientific research, not necessarily always the Journal of Clinical Nutrition, but more in the psychological and or behavioral space, is starting to really look at the reported, there's a happiness index. But looking at overall, measures of happiness, overall life satisfaction, feelings of well-being, and or energy, for example. And these are immediate benefits that consumers desire and want, maybe even more than they realize they want long-term health.
Yeah.
And it's an untapped opportunity to capitalize on the knowledge we talked about, but the feel part of know, feel, do.
Correct.
There are two parts of emotive health. Okay. One is, and I like to talk about lust and love in this sense. All right. So you didn't even know we're going to talk about that.
I love it.
But lust is, I feel this way. I feel this way immediately. I feel joyful. I feel prideful in this moment. Okay. The other, and if you can get people to feel something like positive, you said there was kind of two steps to your equation before. I need to, if I repeat those positive emotive experiences, I get to do what's called cultivating enjoyment, because that's the second half. So the first part is the immediate feeling. The second half is cultivating enjoyment. And that only comes from repeated exposure and positive experience. And so that is an untapped opportunity to tap into the emotions of fruits and vegetables. And they are two different pools of emotions to select from. Fruit evokes different emotions, let's say, and
absolutely
vegetables. So it's super interesting.
I love it. I love it. It sets me up it sets me up to ask you a little bit about it, but I guess, I don't want to call it the crown jewel of what you guys do, but it certainly is a very impactful report, and that's your state of the plate report. And can you share with us what that is? Because I think I read through that whole thing. It's pretty cool.
Thanks for joining the Todd-versation. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hi, this is Dr. Gary Beal, CEO and co-inventor of NatureWrap, a revolutionary coating designed to extend shelf life and cut food waste. Thank you for listening to Todd-versations and Todd Bits. Food waste is a worldwide pressing topic. Here are some of the facts that you need to know. Food waste takes up more room in landfills than anything else. In the United States, we discard more food than any other country, about 80 billion pounds per year. Food waste contributes to 11% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. At Navico, we're revolutionizing the produce industry with our OMRI-approved NatureWrap edible coating. Our goal is to reduce food loss, improve profitability, and elevate sustainability. We're in the business of bringing fresher produce to tables around the world. Check us out at navicoinc.com.
It's super cool. There's more too. If you're a member of PBH, maybe, you can get access to all kinds of cool stuff, but is the state of the plate report is completed every 5 years. And so it's looking at consumption from a comprehensive perspective. But it's really honing in on one part of the consumption data. So it's really frequency as a proxy for habit. We mentioned it earlier throughout. So this research is looking at not just volume of fruit consumed, because we have those numbers, right? And a lot of people in the produce industry have those numbers. The government puts out those numbers too. But it's looking at, and it's not always looking at the sales part of the thing, which we already agreed, hopefully, was one part of the consumption equation. It's not the whole thing. And so what we really are doing now is looking at frequency as the idea around habit being a repeatable, automatic almost response to hopefully increasing consumption. Yeah. So what you see in that report is a lot of times people say, well, who is the fruit and vegetable consumer? And you'll see a lot of reports like that, and the artichoke consumer is like totally different than the pepper consumer, by the way. We can't look at it collectively, but what we can do, and what we wanted to take a different slice of, is who are the people that are like crushing it? Okay. Who are actually the 10% of Americans that are meeting the guidelines that like really are eating all the recommended fruits and vegetable servings per day. And it is about 10% of people from a frequency perspective. So what we did was we said we went to look at it as who are the high frequency, medium frequency, and low frequency consumers. What are they consuming? What are their beliefs? What are their habits? And then try to really look at that in a totally different way to say, could we move light consumers to medium consumers to high frequency consumers? What would it take? Yeah. So what we see generally is that something I mentioned earlier, overall, Americans' consumption habits are slowly eroding. And so we need to do something about that. What can we learn from high frequency consumers? Well, there's a couple of little things. I won't go into all of it, is they actually plan, which is a key component of habit forming behavior. Excuse me one second. They also are less swayed. Gets to something you said earlier, by what their kids want.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. I mean, the report is really something. I mean, it's really, again, it's on the website. You go in there, no matter who you are, no matter what produce company you're sitting in today, you read that, you're going to have a change of opinion. You're going to think differently. You're going to go to market with maybe a different strategy, or start thinking about this bigger conversation around consumption.
Most consumers, if I can just add to that, most Americans are light frequency consumers. Mm-hmm. Here's an example, just to build on what you said. They are eating vegetables once a day, and they are eating fruit even less. They are eating fruit more as snacks.
Right.
And there's a slight uptick there, but it's not enough to make up for stuff. And if some of this research even was completed pre-pandemic, light frequency consumers are not getting most of their vegetables actually at retail. They're getting them at food service.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, food service shut down. It shut down enough that you said that people may actually be changing their behaviors. So light frequency consumers may actually now today be eating less vegetables than they were even just a few years ago, because they're not available to them in a way that is easy for them to consume. It's not done for them, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everybody wants the heavy lifting done, right?
Yeah. So there's some really unique points that you said that kind of look at fruit and vegetable consumption, or even for the marketeer, that might say, how would we use this type of research, frequency research, to inform how we're going to go to market, how we're going to essentially inspire people to eat whatever your product is, and create new occasions for which they should consume. Because even if volume is flat, if we want volume to increase, we have to think of new reasons, new opportunities, new verticals, new markets in a way, new distribution channels for our products.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you and I talked about a little bit offline that I want to throw on the table, I think is important, is that, is how increasing consumption changes the narrative around food waste. And I know that you believe, and I'm in the same boat, that increasing consumption ultimately will help, reduce food waste. And I think it's such an important part of the conversation to add to it. And I appreciate the perspective you've coming back around to everything we've talked about. It's a really powerful statement to say, and you're proving that case, no doubt about it.
Yeah. I think this goes back to that conversation around the long game and the short game. And so, sales is really super important. That's how we know someone made a selection. Help. And even, a lot of discussion might be around access. Access is not consumption either.
Mm-mm.
So but it's important, because if we don't have the access, we can't do the action. So the World Health Organization defines food and nutrition security in the following ways. Is the products, let's say in this case, fruits and vegetables, are they available? Meaning there's enough quantity of them? Are they accessible? I can readily access it. And is it the use? Okay. And I'm going to change that to the word action. So is it available? Is it accessible? And is it actionable? Pbh is focused on the actionable part of consumption. Okay. And there are two sides of that coin, I guess you could say. Is one is the actual consumption is either we're going to eat it or we're not. Once we have access and or we've made the sale, we've made the selection, are we going to eat it or are we not? If we're not going to eat it, we're going to waste it.
Correct.
So we can't really talk about consumption without talking about food waste. One thing I find really interesting is, and I've worked all the way back at the ag seed tech level and with growers, and, there are important projects that happen on farm, for example, gleaning projects and stuff like that. But really agricultural innovation is so important on effectuating food waste at the farm level. And then we see that retailers have significant initiatives. Food service has significant initiatives around decreasing food waste at that level. Okay. So at the retail level, at the food service level, there's still going to be some, but whether we're looking at reducing shrinkage or, there's initiatives there. The largest amount of food waste is not in those two places. It's at the consumer level.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing at Pbh is dedicating essentially a big part of what we have like kind of quarterly campaigns. And so we're addressing it. And we know that the content itself really performs well. And that's because it aligns with a core audience value around, millennials and Gen Zs, saving the world, saving the planet, and making sure that we're sustainable as a society. I think there's a very important tug of war that I want to raise is if a lot of retailers have significant food waste initiatives, anti-hunger food waste initiatives, and there's a lot of, focus on health and wellness, for example, at retail in particular, and even our federal government has significant focus areas around this. I think what we're looking at is, are people throwing things away? And at the farm, I think we focus a lot on the farm level. I think we're focused a lot on the supply chain, but we're not working in the context of really what's in the mind of consumers around waste. Yep. No consumer wants to waste their hard-earned dollar on throwing food away. Nobody really does. So are we making fruits and vegetables actionable in a way that they can select it, store it so it lasts? They can serve and savor it in a way that takes advantage of different types of produce or different commodities. Certain ones last longer than other ones.
Sure.
Kind of idea. And so what you're seeing now at PBH is we're integrating that in everything we do.
Yeah.
I would love to see retail suggest to their suppliers that as part of sustainable initiatives, they should support organizations like PBH that are working directly with consumers to make produce actionable
I 100% agree.
as a way to reduce food waste and actually increase consumption of healthful products, which impacts their bottom line. Because if people are healthy and active and they are able to make a good income and stay out of the hospital. And so I think there's a real missing loop there around food waste and actual consumption. So I'm glad you.
Yeah, no. And thank you for saying, I agree with you. People, time to step up, right? There's no more stepping back. We need to step up for the greater good. And I think PBH is, again, it's got to be a part of your budget meeting. It needs to be a part of your conversation. I want to touch on a big, broad topic, which is have a plant. I'd like for you to kind of explain that. I'm going to throw a couple questions at you, just let you run with it. Have a plant. What is have a plant ambassadors? Because when this leads right into what you're just talking about talking to the consumers. Because you got a great group of people out there beating the drum every single day on behalf of people they don't even know, which is
That's
what
right.
I find. They don't even know. They don't know anything about Bob or Becky sitting in Salinas today at all. They just know that
You're
what
right.
Bob and Becky are doing are really important and they love it. So talk about have a plant. Talk about your have a plant ambassadors, because I love the fact that this is all about motivating people. That's the backdrop to this. This is what I took out of it when I dove into it. It's about motivating people, which is one of your mantras. I mean, I don't know how you cannot be inspired by the time we spent together talking today. So if you wouldn't mind, and how many people are you guys actually touching now? Because that's what's going to blow people out of the water. Not only the people you got, out there kicking clods and making it happen, but you're not talking to 5 people. You're talking to a 5 with a whole bunch of zeros behind them.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so remember our mantra around know, feel, and do.
Yeah. Right.
And the idea of being self-reflective. So when I came to PBH, I had this was like the opening of my interview actually. And so, I really wanted the job because it's a dream to work with fruits and vegetables. But I did say this is, do you want to change? Like, are you open to that? Because if you want to change, I'm your person. If you don't, I'm not. And it doesn't mean that I can change everything, but that's the spirit of the idea here. And so I said, I know things need to change because we're not affecting consumption. And again, PBH can't do it by itself. So most of the campaigns that PBH and even the federal government do are really what I would call knowledge-based campaigns. 5 a day. How many, do we need? This is important.
Yeah.
2 is more matters. Yeah, you should eat more, because it's like super good.
Sure.
And then even things like people might have heard of half your plate. That is another way of saying maybe 5 a day in a way, it's like a more visual representation, which some people can really latch onto easier in the context of what they do every day. But none of those are necessarily emotive or feeling oriented or based on the data, getting people to do anything. So have a plant was born out of the idea that we need to reinforce fruits and vegetables healthfulness, which by the way, is we should be, I want to thank my predecessor, Elizabeth Pavanka, and the industry for supporting the 5 a day campaign and the More Matters campaign. We have been successful. Most of the American public is aware and believes that fruits and vegetables are healthful for them.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Great. We want to make sure that we reinforce that, but we want people to feel something in a way that gets them to do something.
Right.
So have a plant is PBH's consumer call to action that is grounded in behavioral science and is focused on millennial and Gen Zs in a way that inspires repeated positive behavior and focuses on the eating experience of fruits and vegetables, not necessarily how many, but more of the feeling and emotive connectivity to the fruit and vegetable eating experience.
I love it. Now you've got these ambassadors out there. You've got, the clod kickers. You've got these folks that are blowing up TikTok and doing everywhere and anywhere.
They're so creative. So PBH has always worked with, we mentioned the public health community, and also a
Sure.
very important and powerful group in retail dietitians. So what we want, when I came on board, I said, yeah, we need more people singing from the same songbook, essentially.
Mhm.
And so fruits and vegetables are the plants that no one's eating enough of. And so this also really resonates with our ambassadors, who are credentialed people at 3 points of influence: the point of sale at retail.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is those retail dietitians. I mentioned dietitians that in and of themselves are natural fruit and vegetable produce promoters. So they're
For sure.
already doing this. How do we kind of capture that power of that group? At the point of flavor, which is the second point, and that is the culinary and food service experience. How do we, and then some would say also at retail too, with prepared, but how do we capture that group and the power there? And at the point of inspiration, before you even make your way into retail or food service, you need to be thinking about this.
Mhm.
So the ambassadors are a group of volunteer content contributors at the point of sale, the point of flavor, and the point of inspiration. And when we had launched the Have a Plant movement in 2019, we started with 12. We now have nearly 300 that are committed to providing regular content to PBH in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there. We have a much even broader network of influencers that not just on social media or have digital footprints, but that are really in the position to, through leadership, their thought leadership, affect change for their sector. And so that's the power of that last part I said around convening.
Yeah.
And you have to have a leader. Some people come in and just say, you know what, I think we should grow food on Mars. Great. That's very disruptive. We still have to get from point A to point B. Some people say, I'm super wise. I'm going to be a sage leader. And I think for PBH, my hope is that we can be a convening leader that gets a lot of different people to sing off the same sheet of music, to see consumption as a unifying opportunity to really impact positively public health for the public good.
I love it. I mean, you guys are doing such a powerful job. You're doing truthfully, you are doing some really, really heavy lifting.
I am so, like, my muscles are huge. Yeah.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, you all are. I mean, you really are. You're doing some really, really heavy lifting. And the thing is that I think is so impressive is that while the lift is heavy, you're spreading it out, right? You're asking the right people to get involved across all these different sectors, whether you're a producer, you're a trader, whatever it is, and now you're influencers and people working directly to talk and touch consumers, and to spread that out, to get that weight off of, all that weight off of one set of shoulders and spread it out amongst many, just brings everybody together. It allows these voices to lift up and to come from multiple angles. It's super refreshing. It really is.
Thank you. I believe it is for a industry now that is mature to some degree, in terms of, we've all been around.
Yeah.
We see the data, we see the numbers. I believe this is the right approach for right now, because produce consumption can and should be a unifying issue. And food is often a unifier across many cultures. And so everybody wants to support fruits and vegetables, really. And you mentioned before, like, these ambassadors, many of them are natural fruit and vegetable promoters from a point of service.
Mhm.
And they really see it as not just as a professional mission, but also a personal one.
Mhm.
And so what we're able to do as a convening leader is tap into those personal and professional passions to get really important work done, on behalf of not just the industry, right, but on behalf of the public. And the support that we've gotten and the interest we've gotten is fantastic. We could do so much more with we have a really small team. We could do so much more with others coming on board, for sure.
Well, hey, call to action, industry, step the hell up and support PBH.
Oh, thank you.
You know, I mean, bottom line, you get involved, ask how to help, get online and look. You know, Wendy, I got to tell you, I've appreciated you today tremendously. You've inspired me. This has been a really super fun conversation. I think that it's a very needed conversation right now for this industry to hear, especially at the depth of what you shared with us and where we went with it, and got people really to see not just what's on the surface, but the thinking, where the passion comes from, where people's hearts are lying, you know, what the overall mission is, and what do we need to do, you know, what do we need to do today to make tomorrow better? And I think you were very eloquent in how you described what you've done. And I'm just stoked that you're here to hang out with me. And I couldn't think of a better group to put up on the screen in the month of April.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think you too have inspired me and given me even greater passion. And that is, you know, right now it is a challenging time for a lot of people. So if we look at the individual level, we see and understand that, you know, people are hurting everywhere. But then we also look at the challenges of many in industry, right? And so the rate of change is so quick and so fast paced. What you've inspired me is I feel all those same things. And I feel the weight and the challenges faced by many in the industry. And I see our mission as maybe more critical than ever at a time when it's really hard to take your eye off the ball that's right in front of your face before it hits you in the face. Yeah. Is if we learn anything from challenging economic times, it's the thing that you raised, is that in many points where we see kind of a fork in the road, we hope people make choices for their health, but we only have so much patience, so much endurance, so much perseverance. And sometimes we make choices just because that ball is going to hit us in the face, where our health actually becomes a secondary priority when it needs to be a primary one. And that includes our mental health as well. So even though these are very challenging times, you've renewed my spirit in thinking about just how important our mission and our work is in a time like this one, when it would be easy to take our eye off the ball and just focus on this quick fix or whatever's we're focused on right in the moment, but that the moments do have to continue to have momentum, and that has to be positive momentum for fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind of you to say, and I appreciate that. And I agree. I think we've got to. I think the time is now. The time is now for the industry to step up. This is worthy of everybody's efforts. It really is. I can't beat the drum any harder. You know, I really can't. And I'm excited about the work you're doing and what's coming. I'm grateful you're at the helm, and I look forward to seeing what's coming next and being a part of it. And please come back and share. You know, it'd be an honor to have you come back. Anything you want to put on here and talk about, you've got a home here, and you definitely have it. You know, you got a fanboy on this side. So
cool. Fan over here too.
High
five, as you said. High five.
High five. I love it. Thank you. Thank you again very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Everybody, thanks for hanging out with us. If this does not inspire you, I do not know what to do. I beg you every time to say hi to your mailman. I talk about being inspired every day. It's such a great gift to give to everybody. If the time with Wendy hasn't done it, give me a holler. We'll try CPR. I don't even know what to do for you, but come on. This is a chance to make a positive change in the world, and you can make it happen. So thanks for watching. Don't forget, check us out on social media. We hang out with all the cool kids there. We'll see you on Todd-versations, wherever. And, go PBH, make it a part of your day.
Have a plant.
Have a plant, for God's sakes. Have a plant. I love it. Thanks again, Wendy. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.